Summer is ending, fall is approaching, and as the days are getting darker and shorter, what we need is atmosphere. Dark, beautiful, macabre atmosphere. Let's delve into something Gothic, but not just any Gothic. Today, I'm going to recommend 3 of my favorite Gothic films from around the turn of the century, so late 90s to early 2000s. You'll get classic Gothic motifs like vampires, hauntings, and Frankenstein-figures, but all 3 have their own stories to tell apart from the Gothic classics that we already know and love. Spoiler-free. Let's start with the earliest film on the list, Habit, a low-budget indie vampire flick with a heavy dose of Gen X moodiness and New York atmosphere. Sam is an alcoholic living in New York. It's Halloween, and we meet him on his way to a costume party at his friend's apartment. His ex-girlfriend, who just moved out because of his drinking, is at the party, but his attention is on Anna, a strange woman who claims to know one of his friends who's throwing the party. They leave together, yet before the night is over, she disappears. A funny habit of hers that happens from time to time, just the way Sam's blackouts happen from time to time. After running into each other again at a fair and becoming intimate, they begin to engage in a hyper-sexually charged situationship that sometimes includes her biting him and drinking his blood, which eventually has Sam questioning whether or not she might be a vampire. But is his self-destruction warping his sense of reality? The vampire has long been a staple of classic Gothic literature. They're parasites, yes, but they can represent different things. Bram Stoker's Dracula acted as a corrupting force, a foreign other corrupting London. But here, there are potential themes regarding alcoholism as a corrupting force, as something that drains the lifeblood of its victims. No spoilers here, so I'm not going to say whether or not Anna is or isn't a vampire, but that question does drive the narrative. The very question of how much of Sam's perceptions of Anna as a vampire are real, as well as the element of his alcoholism itself, are both rooted in the Gothic genre. This is the Gothic motif of hallucination and the narcotic. Being unsure of the narrator's reliability, in addition to the narrator themselves being uncertain of the reality of what they are sensing and seeing and feeling, engages us with the possibility that humans are moving through the world constantly misunderstanding and misrecognizing the reality around them. It seems relevant to the time period that this film revolves around a self-destructive character suffering from alcoholism that distorts his sense of reality and induces uncertainty in the audience. Youth culture at the time was disillusioned by the rampant consumerism of the 80s, and it was distrustful of the establishment. A lot of art was ironic, self-referential, and generally navel-gazy at the time. If the Gothic responded to classicism's emphasis on order with chaos, its emphasis on continual progress and enlightenment, with questions about man's ability to understand the nature of the world around us at all, this grungy, late 90s film's directionless character, wandering the streets lost in a fog of self-destruction and ennui, seems to have confronted the materialism of the past decade with a blurry, hazy reminder that we are lost children wandering forward into an uncertain future. That future did arrive, though, with the dawn of a new millennia. And so, too, do we arrive at the second film on our list, 2001's Session 9. This one is a personal favorite of mine. The abandoned asylum and the autumnal imagery reminds me not only of the falls I experienced growing up on the East Coast, but also a very similar seeming abandoned asylum not far from the college that I attended that I may or may not have explored inside once or twice. An asbestos cleanup crew gets a job readying an abandoned mental asylum to be converted into a local administrative building. The job is dirty and it can be dangerous, but for the sake of profit, the team lead agrees to get it done in a week, despite the safety concerns of his second. As they get to work, they are faced not just with asbestos and creepy dark hallways, but also with the history of the building itself. Strange occurrences and odd behavior soon follow, leading the workers deeper into the building's recesses and still darker places yet. There have been a lot of hauntings in literature and film, but some of the best ones revolve around haunted buildings. a motif familiar from Gothic works featuring the haunted castle. After all, hauntings are often about spirits or occurrences from the past. And what is a castle or an old mansion, or in this case an insane asylum, but a vestige of that past? Hauntings in classic Gothic literature could include real ghosts or ghosts of the mind. But what was important was that the ghost functioned as a revenant and the building functioned as a ruin. Motifs that symbolize the past's continuation into the present, meaning that whether you were being haunted by spirits or misdeeds from the past, the fact stood that the past is not dead. Whereas in Horace Walpole's Gothic novel The Castle of Otranto, the haunted castle spoke to the feudal past and its concerns, such as family lineage and the sins of the father, here, the old asylum is a revenant of the dark side of the American psychiatric care system and its practices. At the turn of the century, it may have been tempting to imagine society leaving the uglier parts of history behind, to imagine collectively moving forward into a new era of progress. But as ever with the Gothic, progress is challenged by the notion that the past lingers, and society's upward trajectory is not guaranteed. There are other themes in this film worth exploring in relation to the Gothic, but because we're not doing spoilers today, I'll leave you with this thought. Not only is our dark past of mistreating mental illness still alive in the ruins of these mental institutions, but even more worrying, we may not be any more enlightened as to the dark corners of the human mind now than we were at the previous turn of the century. And finally, relevant to this film, a labyrinthine castle or mansion or asylum is a great metaphor for the murky interiors of the mind. Well, if the mental well-being of people in the new century was on rocky ground, maybe we should check in with their bodies. Which takes us to the third entry on the list, 2002's May. It's a twist on Frankenstein, and man is it twisted. As a child, May had a lazy eye and was forced by her mother to wear an eye patch in an attempt to hide the imperfection so as to be accepted by the other children. Now, as an adult, May has difficulty connecting with other people besides her dolls. But she has hobbies. She sews. Notice her patchwork clothing? That's gotta mean something, right? And she works at a vet's office, stitching up animals. Even so, in her loneliness, she forms kind of unhealthy obsessions. And it often leads to disappointment because nobody's perfect, even if parts of them are. Her latest obsession, though, may be perfect this time. Could this be love? While Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley's Frankenstein, with its depiction of a creature brought to life with no more than a collection of dead tissue and some electricity, spoke to the fears of people whose sense of humanity was threatened by scientific discoveries which disrupted their religiously ordained metaphysical view of man and replaced it with something far more corporeal. Basically, the Victorians were uncomfortable with the idea that maybe we're a bunch of meatbags and not some, divinely inspired beings. May's habit of viewing people not as whole people, but as body parts, speaks to different anxieties for a different time. Her obsession is not with creating life, nor whether or not life's origins are material or spiritual, but rather with creating physical perfection. Modern culture has for a long time been a world of advertisements. Preceding today's constant ads on social media, fashion magazines and cable TV commercials were a regular fare for the masses. And they all sold beauty and sex, which was implicitly synonymous with happiness. Everything from burger to car commercials. In culture at large, it served to create a fixation for many people on the pursuit of physical perfection. May's inability to recognize people as whole beings with internal and external aspects, with flaws and all, spoke to the growing disconnect in individuals' perceptions of themselves and others. All I can say is with how many times Gothic narratives and motifs have been reused, recycled, and still reinvented, it's a genre that's perfect for those looking to dig into the anxieties of any time period since its inception. I'm hoping to do a whole series of videos on Gothic subjects, and I hope that you're down to join me for those too. I'll see you next time.